Happy New Year's, everyone. This is Patrick Alvin, and you are listening to the SPMI podcast, episode number 4. Hi, everyone. So today we have a very important and exciting topic. We're going to be talking about New Year's resolutions. Now, I know many of you have New Year's resolutions, and the reason for this podcast is to make sure that everyone will be able to stick with those resolutions and see them all the way through. We know that research studies show that approximately 80% of all New Year's resolutions fail, and most do so within less than 2 months. So right now, you're most likely listening to this in your third or fourth week in January, so about that halfway point. And we want to make sure that that just does not occur. Now, let's just talk about these reasons. We're going to break these down. I want to talk about the first reason why most athletes will not achieve their New Year's resolution goals. And that is due to society's emphasis on ideal results and effort. You see, many athletes, they get really caught up in what is idealized success. Think about, if I want to be great, I got to make sure that I'm sticking to my routines all the time and that my success is linear and there are no setbacks. Well, that is definitely a recipe for failure. So what actually happens there? Well, what happens with that societal ideology is that it often results in a perfectionist mentality from the athlete. Okay, this is when he or she takes on too much too soon. Now, what happens as a result, of course, is the athlete often quits, right? They quit before habits can even be established. Now, let's talk briefly about habits. Habits on average, we know and it depends, of course, on the individual and on how difficult or easy that task is, but it takes on average about 66 days to complete a habit. So imagine that about 80% of all individuals give up on their New Year's resolution within 2 months, which is just before forming a habit. How ironic, right, when we look at the statistics. Now, let's look a little bit further here. I want to give a great example of this. Let's just take gym memberships. Gym memberships are something that spikes incredibly high the first of every year. That's why you'll see, if you ever watch on TV the New Year's resolutions, you'll see that, New Year's Eve, different celebrations you'll see on different channels, that these workout or these gyms, they advertise like crazy to try to get people to buy around that time because people are excited, hey, it's the New Year's. But what we found statistically is that spending increases 42%. That means that gym membership rates go up 42% in the first month of the year, every year. So it's significant. Everyone has these great ideas. And what are many people thinking at that time? Well, they're idealizing how they're going to look, how they're going to feel, but also they are idealizing the process of reaching those goals. So how perfect they're going to be every single week in training. For example, you may have an individual or an athlete say, hey, you know what, at the beginning of the year, I'm going to work out and train 90 minutes to 120 minutes to 2 hours every single day, 5 days a week, and I'm going to work on my lower body, my upper body, and I'm going to do cardio, and I'm going to do weight training, and they do all this stuff, and then what happens? They quit, right? They quit. It's just set too high. So that's one of the big struggles there, is that it's because of society's emphasis. It's not because it's something they necessarily want. Of course they want it, but they're pushed to do something that is highly unlikely because of what society says, hey, you know what, that is success. Now, let's go to the second reason. The number 2 reason why most athletes will not achieve their New Year's resolution is due to what's called willpower. Okay, willpower is defined as the ability to control one's self. Okay, so that means, hey, I have control over my decisions, my actions, you have control over yours. But the problem with willpower is that it is limited. We do not have infinite supply of willpower. And the other problem with it is that it is highly or heavily dependent upon, or I should say, it's heavily affected by stress. Okay, so as stress levels go up, our willpower tends to go down. And that's another problem. And the reason why is because if we take our big plans we have in the beginning of the year, is okay, well, I'm going to do this on Monday and this on Tuesday, and we keep compounding it every day, Well, there's a lot of things we can't control, right? There's outside variables. Let's say your family life gets busier, your training gets busier, maybe you have an injury you have to tend to for rehab. All these things start occurring, stress levels go up, and then what happens? Our willpower goes down. And if we don't have willpower, then we don't really have anything else to fight against the resistance, the emotional, physical resistance to continue with those habits. So that's the other struggle. All right. So that's another big problem, is just, depending fully upon willpower. Now, let's look at reason number 3. The third reason why most athletes do not achieve or do not fulfill their New Year's resolutions is due to mindset. Okay, mindset just simply means an athlete's belief system. But this is a really, really big one. Just think about this for a moment. With your New Year's resolutions right now, think about how much you believe you can finish it, how much you believe you can fulfill those goals. Do you truly believe 100% that the goals that you've set for this year you will reach? Or are you kind of halfway in, halfway out, or 80%? But this is a really big part that you want to face and understand. Because if your belief system isn't there and your goals are very high, there's a good chance you're not going to achieve those goals. I like this quote. It's done by Henry Ford. Actually, I believe it's a modified version from Confucius. But Confucius said something similar along the lines. But what Henry Ford said is, he said that whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And that's kind of what's happening there, right? Like, do you think you can? You think you can't? Remember being a kid, they had the little engine that could, right? I think I can, I think I can. Well, you have to make sure your belief system is much stronger than that. And that's a big one. So that's the third reason. Reason number 4 is due to resistance to discomfort. Okay, so the resistance or lack of resilience to discomfort is a major struggle when it comes to athletes sticking to their New Year's resolution. And one problem is due to what's called reorientation. So this means whenever an athlete resists a new goal, what happens is they break away from it, right? So let's say you have this goal. We'll go back to the gym example. I'm going to go 5 times a week. All of a sudden you miss a week, or you miss even a couple of days. Then you have to reorient. It's like, okay, well, let me kind of get everything back together again to be able to get back into this routine. And reorientation is a problem because it takes, once again, willpower. It becomes harder to refocus and regroup. And we know that studies have also found that it can really, really throw people off for great deals of time. So we want to make sure that we don't experience that. We don't fall into that trap of resistance to discomfort. Now let's go into number 5. The 5th reason why many will not achieve their New Year's resolutions is because a lot of them end up becoming the worst enemy. Now, what does this really mean? What it means is, let's take specifically our self-talk, what we're telling ourselves throughout the day. Well, this is a big, important, pivotal part of reaching the goals. Okay, in fact, many athletes struggle with talking themselves out of their commitment and focusing on all the physical pain and the amount of time of their commitment. And this daily self-talk, of course, makes it very hard to reach success. So if every single time we're talking ourselves out of it, right, saying we can't do it, it's too much, oh, not today, that, of course, is a huge, huge problem, right? It's counterintuitive of what we are trying to achieve. So we definitely want to be aware that our self-talk is in the right place. The 6th reason why most athletes do not succeed in fulfilling their New Year's resolution is due to quitting. And I know that's super obvious. I mean, it's like, obviously, yeah, Patrick, of course, if you quit, you're not going to fulfill your goals. But it does need to be recognized as quitting is the only thing that will truly stop you from achieving your New Year's goals, right? And I'm not just talking about physically quitting, but it's more about the mental and the emotional part of quitting, right? So we want to be aware that when we go in, quitting is not an option. And the 7th reason why most athletes do not succeed in reaching their New Year's resolution is due to what I like to call walking alone. Okay, so walking alone simply means that most athletes try to take on their New Year's resolution by themselves without any outside help, right? Like lone warriors. Okay, I'm going to do this, and I don't need my coach. I don't need my mental coach. I don't need a fitness expert. I don't need anything, like a nutritionist, whatever. I'm good. And that's a big struggle too. Trying to walk alone is not only tough physically, but it's mentally, emotionally. And what happens with this is that the purpose, for example, your purpose may even be, on your future impact on the world. And we'll talk about that later. So I'm going to cut out all that because I want to get into that in a moment. But that's the other big part, is that we do walk alone. All right, so now I want to talk about solutions, right? Let's talk about solutions and how to achieve the goals. We've just identified the culprits, the problems, the struggles, but let's look at the solutions. So the first solution to succeeding in your New Year's resolution goal is to align it to a purpose. Okay, purpose is kind of a word that's thrown around quite a bit. It's kind of vague, but I want to specify it more for you guys who are listening right now. And let's just take purpose and define it as something that is greater or of more importance than oneself. Okay, so think about that for a moment. Something that's greater or of more importance than oneself. More specifically, I'm talking to you. So you want to think about something that's bigger, that means more than you. And this can be many, many things, right? Purpose can be quite a few things, and I'm going to give you guys some examples. First off, one part about purpose could be the joy that you bring to others. For example, I was working with an athlete a couple weeks ago on this. He's a professional athlete, and the pressure that he's been going through, and many athletes have been going through, makes you focus more on yourself, which then creates a lot of anxiety. So we're talking about purpose, and his purpose was putting a smile on other athletes' faces. It's particularly children. So he goes there on the field, and there are some kids who are just really happy to see him perform. Now, why is that purpose? It's purpose because it redirects the focus away from him, and it therefore takes off the pressure, but more importantly, it helps them push through the tough times. Right? We're going to push through it more when something's greater than even ourselves. Other examples of purpose would be things such as bringing joy to people you love. Now, I'm a big proponent of saying, look, you shouldn't play for other people. We've spoken about that before, but it's more about, yes, you're playing for yourself, but it's the process of what you're doing. The emotional part, saying, hey, let's say, your parents care a lot about your sport and you want to please them. Well, it shouldn't be about impressing them, but I'm sure that your parents want to see you happy. So your purpose, or part of it at least, would be to go out there and, fulfill that goal that they want for you, which is to enjoy it. Enjoy it, not to be afraid, not to be scared. Lastly, a major, major purpose for many, many athletes I work with is faith. So their faith is really big because faith is greater than oneself. There's this saying, you can either walk with God or walk alone. And those who believe, they walk by faith and not by sight. And therefore, that's a huge purpose. There's no fear attached to it. So that's the other thing too. In order to get through our New Year's resolutions, we are focusing on a purpose which is outside of ourselves, which means fear does not exist. So that's the other big part. Okay, a second solution, it's a simple one, but it's an important one, is to start small. Okay, so as mentioned earlier about willpower, since our willpower is limited, we must first establish habits, right? So therefore, when you set your New Year's goals, aim to see them all the way through. Okay, not just all the way through, but also look to value that part of your goals, right? Instead of the idealized result. So for example, let's go back to the gym membership part there where, everyone has these big goals that they're going to go X number of times and they're going to be training super intense. But a lot of times that's the wrong way to go about it. So if we start small, this is kind of an idea of what it will look like. And it may sound too small at first. But instead of having this really hardcore, strict training regimen, first you want to establish the habit. So the habit could simply be, I'm going to walk through the gym doors 5 days a week. That sounds kind of silly, but you're walking through the gym door, which means as soon as you walk through it, boom, most likely you're going to work out. And if you don't, that's okay. First, get in the habit of that. And what happens with most athletes I work with is because they're highly competitive in nature, that's all they need. Once they walk through the door, their competitive instinct kicks in and they're working and they're training hard, and before you know it, they're excelling way beyond their original plans. So just really start small with that. The third solution is even smaller than that, and that is to show up. So we have start small and show up, right? So once again, when you have these goals, you want to show up, because that is how you establish what's called in psychology mastery. Mastery is it is a dedicated, consistent repetition, practice repetition on your craft over time, which creates it. And the only way to do that is through showing up. So a lot of times what happens, once again, going back to the perfectionist example, is many athletes never show up because they're so caught up in trying to look great the first time, trying not to fail, and they never get started. And we can kind of have this argument where, well, Patrick, great work is better than good work. But what I really want everyone to do is first go after being good. It kind of sounds like I'm setting the bar too low, but there's a reason for that. No one starts out great. At least anything that's worthwhile, you have to work at it. And some, yes, have to work harder than others. But be very grateful and take pride in good work. Because good work will get you going. It's going to be much more productive, right? If you only focus on great, then most likely you're going to participate in that exercise or activity far less times, and it won't be great. So really take pride in good, and with enough good, it will become great, right? I like this famous, I would say, this quote from famous Italian sculptor Michelangelo, who once stated, "If people knew how hard I had to work to gain my mastery, it would not seem so wonderful at all." Right? So he said, if people only knew how hard I had to work to gain my mastery, it wouldn't seem so wonderful at all. Imagine anyone who's ever seen his work. It's unbelievable. But it didn't start out that way. He's even stating, look, it's not that amazing. I was putting in the work day after day, hour after hour. But we have to look at good work and take pride in that. So simply showing up is the other solution. Take pride in it. Fourth solution to achieving your New Year's resolution is to look forward to discomfort. Right? Athletes need to make a habit of both wanting the discomfort that comes with committing to something new and challenging, as well as accepting that discomfort is a part of success and it's supposed to be there. That's the other big part. Discomfort is supposed to be there. It's a part of success. So as you're going towards your New Year's resolutions, if you experience discomfort, not just physical discomfort like I'm tired, but restlessness, like, oh, man, I should be doing something else, I want you guys to understand it's a part of life. Hey, maybe it should be here right now. That's cool. So let's invite it. That's a big part. The fifth solution is to reward yourself to what I like to call commitment adherence. Commitment adherence means that you want to reward yourself for every week of consistency. Of course, this should also be done inconsequentially, which means don't reward yourself in a bad way. All right, I'll give you a good example. Let's say you're working towards eating healthier, and you're able to go a week with eating really well. Well, what you don't want to do is splurge on a Sunday and just decide you're going to eat all these chocolates and sweets, because obviously that defeats the whole purpose, right? And it's going to make it harder next week to actually continue with it. But instead, you can reward yourself with something unrelated to that nutrition, right? It could be something like renting a good movie or, buying a new car. No, I'm kidding. Don't buy a new car. Well, maybe you could if you want, but say getting a car wash. Just something small that's inconsequential. The sixth solution is to bring someone along in your journey, right? We spoke about this. Don't go alone, right? Don't walk alone. Bring someone along, okay? So here's what we also know through some studies. We know that some studies show that when you have what's called an accountability partner, it can increase your commitment level by up to 80%. I think that's pretty awesome. If you have these great resolutions you want to achieve this year, think about who you can bring along. It doesn't have to be someone you necessarily have to like either. It's just someone who is highly committed. The other part too about sports is a lot of the athletes I work with, they even have friends who are not in their sport, but they're very high level. So you can bring them along too. If you guys are working on the same thing, whether it's something fitness related or mentally related, or nutrition, have someone come with you. Have someone you can work with. That'll be really cool, and you guys can keep each other accountable for it. Now, the seventh and final solution to achieving your goals is to be kind to yourself. Okay, so many athletes quit because when they make a mistake along the way, they mentally beat themselves up over the mistake. Okay, now remember, you're the one who's with yourself 100% of the time, right? That sounds kind of obvious, but we don't think about it like that. So if we're with ourselves 100% of the time, how should we treat ourselves? So therefore, you want to have some patience and understanding of yourself as you go through the challenge. Even more importantly, practice being compassionate with yourself and even allow for a failed day here and there. So once again, we're getting out of the perfectionist trap. If you make a mistake, it's okay. So I kind of have a rule here. Okay, you can follow this rule or not, but it's helped many athletes. You can even allow yourself to make some mistakes. That means, okay, have a day where, I didn't do my New Year's resolution goal. But the rule that comes with that is that you want to make sure that if that ever happens, that you then go right back to your goal the next day. You don't allow it to just snowball to where, okay, I miss one day, I miss 2 days, I miss a week, I miss a month. Now, as soon as you miss that day, you commit 100% and say, hey, I'm going right at it the next day. And then on top of that, make sure that it's not every other day, right? So we have to limit that. So let's say every month, it's no more than twice. Okay, so you want to keep yourself accountable for that. But once again, if you also have an accountability partner to add to that, it's going to be easier. Let's say you guys are going to work out together. So you say, okay, we're going to meet at 8 in the morning at the gym or outside, on the field. Well, he's like, hey, I'm going to be there. You're going to be there too. You guys know right away, if you're there or not. So that's super important. But yes, these are the 7 reasons and 7 solutions. Now, before finishing, I definitely wish everyone a successful journey in achieving your goals. I just started doing the podcast again. I was kind of away for a while because we're working on this amazing program that I'll be releasing to athletes later. I'm really excited to share with the athlete community. I know it's going to be a huge benefit. But we're going to be doing this every week. I do highly encourage everyone who's listening to also subscribe to this podcast, but also subscribe to the YouTube channel. Okay, it's called SPMI TV. SPMI TV. It's excellent. It's going to be videos there every single week as well. And also there's an Instagram that's called Sports Mental Training. So it's one word, Sports Mental Training. Also has a lot of great content. And of course, if anyone's interested, please check out the website. It is at www.gospmi.com. A lot of great content. If you're interested in getting started, please shoot an email. But I'm looking forward to bringing more content, and I wish everyone a great week, a successful week, and I'll see you soon.